Hey guys, so what we're going to do is work on a little bit of type and we're going to introduce a bit of image. So in this first in-class project, we will open up our InDesign file. You'll see that there's a story on Muhammad Ali. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our margins and columns. And again, very important that we set these up, adjust them if you need to. I never set up my margins and columns and then don't use them because it's always the sort of safe way to go if I don't want if I want to make sure that things line up. So I've gone with 3 columns. This first one we're going to go purely type. So I'm going to set up my margins and columns. I'm going to just change I'm going to change the gap between the columns. So I'm going to go back to my margins and columns and just close that down a little bit to 0.125. And then I will make sure that my column up here is 0.125 as well. That way we have the same amount of space between our columns. I'm going to move my stats over here, and then I'm just going to basically figure out if I work from the bottom, where do I adjust this until we sort of get to until we get all 3 columns as close as possible. That's really just called copy fitting. Copy fitting is really just sort of understanding how much text you have and then adjusting your layout based on that. As you get more into design, copy fitting could be working on a 24-page book and basically starting with one text, one box of text, and then seeing how many pages it takes to lay out the entire book. So I'm just going to start with this. I like to leave a gap at the end because I can adjust that. I might even give it more than that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select my type. So just so you know, a couple key commands that will help you with this type of thing. If you go Command A, it will select everything, all of your text. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go, for this one, I'm going to go with the serif. So I'll start with, and remember when you're using body copy, you never really use bold and you don't really use italic. Those are weights in type that we sort of use for things like headlines, pull quotes, captions, things that we want to stand out. But a bold, if you look at how that looks, it actually is quite a bit harder to read an entire story in bold, just because the serifs tend to fill in and they get, it gets quite thick. So if I go to Baskerville regular, then the letter forms are much more defined. So that's what I'm going to do with this first one. Before I even really start thinking about designing it, I like to sort of get my type set a little bit. So I'm going to leave myself some space here, like I said. Then I'm going to go over, and I'm actually just going to select all of my infographics. And I'm actually going to start just by, if you saw what I did there, I just eyedrop. So the eyedrop, both in Illustrator and in Design, allows you to sort of eyedrop an area and then it'll pick up that characteristic for now my infographics. So I'm just going to select my infographics and I will just sort of start playing around. If I have a good look at them, I'm going to take the numbers. So I'm going to add 1942, and then that's going to be my main number. on this one. Then on the next one, I'm going to go 2016. This height, I don't think is that important, so I'm going to get rid of it. Total fights. Let's see. Oops. Wins is a big one, so I'm going to go. I'm actually going to take these numbers and pull them out because you can go 61 total fights, and that would make a lot of sense. And then I do the same thing with wins. So I'm going to go. I'm going to get rid of that. So now I have that. So basically all I'm doing at this point is I'm really sort of setting up my copy. I'll do the same thing. I'll take my intro and I'm going to make that Baskerville as well. And on this first spread, what you're going to do is work it with serifs, and you can determine what serif it is. You are going to set it all just using type. So now that I have everything in there, I can sort of determine what's going to happen next as far as the design goes. One of the things I'm going to do with this first layout is I'm just going to concentrate on really good sizing and positioning of type. So what I've done is I've moved my margins and columns quite up high, and that's just so I can incorporate all of my type. So as you can sort of see, I'm going to start with alley up here. I'm using, in this one, I'm using primarily grays, blacks, and grays. So you can sort of see what I'm going to try and do is I'll add a pull quote. I'm going to add a drop cap. I'm going to have some numbers that I pull out, and I'm going to treat this one as pure type. So I've already sort of decided that I am going to have my intro copy. Basically, it is going to work with the rest of my type, and I'll actually move my numbers up to sort of fit the space there. This first one, what we're really trying to accomplish is sort of perfect spacing. So I know that is sometimes a little bit tough because we're just kind of starting out. So if you have a look over here, what I've done is I've broken my infographics into sort of sections. So I've made all of that type 70% gray, just a subtle change. Then I've made the actual numbers 37 points. Now, the other thing that I want you to get used to using in InDesign is text wrap. So if I have a box like this, and let's just say if I just concentrate on one box to start, if I have a box like this and I want it to knock the text out, I will tend to use text wraps. So if you go up under Window and you go down and scroll down to text wrap and click on it, it will bring up a menu that basically gives you an option of many different ways to do the text wrap. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my box is the edge of it goes right up to where my text goes. Now the next thing I'm going to do is if you click up along here, there's many different types of text wrap. So right now the text wrap is actually off. If I do this, you can see that it knocks out some of the type. So if I were to just plop this right in the middle, for instance, and I'm just going to shorten it up just so you can sort of see. If I do that, the text will wrap around this box. If I go to the next one, it's actually, if I do this, it will actually knock a section out. And if I do that, it will knock it will not allow anything beneath it. So I tend to use the first couple more than any other one. So now, if I'm using a text wrap here, let's just say I wanted to introduce my numbers down here. Um, there's a couple different ways to do this. So if I want to use kind of a traditional typesetting device, I might actually have the text actually wrap around this box, and that's where the text wrap idea comes from. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to adjust it so you can sort of see the four coordinates. So when you're doing these things, you want to have visually consistent spacing, and that doesn't mean all the numbers are going to be the same. It just means that, as you can see, I'm going to toggle up, and it's going to start knocking lines out from above. And then if I go to the inside, it's just going to give me some safe space there, and I don't want to have too few words on the line of text next to it. So I'm going to pull it in a little bit. And then beneath, I probably will knock out that sort of thing. So if I go up and I go view, hide guides, or if I go preview, you'll basically see what it looks like. So it doesn't look bad doing it that way. But the bigger picture is that we start getting used to using text wraps when we want to knock out text. So up here, I can actually use this first one, and I can control how much space I want to have underneath my introduction. So in this case, I'm just going to go, I'm going to look at both columns. So if I move it up here, what I want you to really look at is, as I adjust it, watch how this second column, the words change, right? So now all of a sudden when I look at it, there's one thin line and two words left. So I don't love that look. Now it's even worse. Now it's basically looking like a widow, except with two words. So I don't want to have that either. So then I could relatively go like that. It would be nice if I could get two lines to line up. So that's not bad, except this should really line up with the top of the text on the other side. So what I'll do is I'll just come back. I'm going to draw a guide at the very top of the space there, and then I can knock the space out above there too. So then I'm going to open this back up, and then I'll adjust that. So now it lines up here, and I'm going to adjust this. So you can see what happens. There's a lot of actual balancing things out when you want type to work nicely. So let's just say I'm going to give it a bunch of space. So if I do that, and then I'm just going to come up and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger just to take up a bit more of the space. I don't want it to have two words. Open up just a little bit, and that's not bad. So now we have this first paragraph lining up with the text here. We can see that these two lines are lining up. So this is actually starting to look pretty good now. And I can see over here, I actually have lots of room to work with. So now I'm just going to come back, and I'm not actually going to drop those into the text at all. I'm actually going to find spaces for them. So what I'm going to do with this one, and this is what you'll do as well, is that I need to take you got to make sure that your text wraps are not eating into your next column. So I make sure I have 0 text wrap on the left column. I'll make sure that this kind of lines up. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm actually going to inset my my numbers right into the story itself. So what I'm going to do with these infographics is I'm going to visually center them, but they're going to be set left. So I'm going to make sure that all the spaces are out, and then I'm basically going to use tabs instead of keying type. So whenever you use the space bar to move type around, yes, it's in increments, but when you have a lot of increments, it's really tough to line things up. So we use a thing called tabs. So if you go up under type and you click on tabs, basically what will happen is it will set up a little measurement system that you can use right over top of your layout. So right now I don't have anything tabbed. I have everything set left. What I'm actually after, if I sort of take my guide, if I run a guide down the middle of my page or just off to the left to almost try and visually center my numbers, if I sort of do that, then if I've got two numbers, it's gonna sort of look visually centered, but I'm actually going to make it set left. So what you can do with tabs is if you look up here, you have these arrows. Now, if I set it over as my 0 mark here, I can select where the first tab will appear, meaning instead of keying it over, I can actually just hit one tab and it will line up on that mark. So if I set one here, and you see the little arrow at the 1 inch mark, if I go over to 70 and I hit tab, it will line it up. And consequently, it will line all of these things up. So this one, I don't really want to have one number or one word there on a line. So I'm just going to bring both words down and then tab those over. So as you can sort of see, the nice thing about it is it really makes lining things up very easy. So if I do that, so I've kind of moved it over too far. So the nice thing about that is if I select it all, and you'll see it highlights this tab, I can actually move the tab over now, and it will adjust the type. So there you can sort of see it's all sort of lined up down the middle of the page. So again, all you need to do is select that type and it will tell you, just go Command A, it will tell you, oh, there's your tab. So you just move the tab and it will move the text. And that's nice for doing things like charts and whenever you have a bunch of these. So there I'm sort of lining everything up set left. In this case, I am going to use a system of really small sort of decorative rules. So with this one, I'm actually going to run a rule that kind of goes down the next to the numbers. And whenever you use rules, if they're meant to be smaller rules, around 0.4 is nice. And in this case, I am using, if you remember, I am using gray numbers, so I'm going to use a gray rule as well. So really what happens is it becomes kind of this decorative element, and I could do it a couple different ways. I could do a series of them so that as I go down, I make them kind of the length of the actual text, and I see I have some spacing issues here. So we've got to make sure we have the same amount of space on all of these things. So I'm just going to open them up a bit. View. I'm going to just take a bit of space out of these things. Oops. There we go. Then I'm going to readjust these. I'm just going to leave, in this case, and this is not a hard, fast rule. This is fairly decorative, but why I'm doing this is because if you kind of notice that area to the left of my numbers, it really has an awkward kind of empty look to it. So all I'm doing here is doing a series of numbers like that. I am going to then try and balance it. So when you're using your text wrap, you really want to try and balance these things. So a lot of times it's visual, right? So even if this bottom of the box is right up to the end, like the other one, it's going to depend on the line break. So I tend to, if I bring up my text wrap, I tend to give myself more space than less space. So I would rather have more space in than have it really tight. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just sort of going to zoom out, and you can sort of see that's pretty far zoomed out. But if you have a look, this is where I'm sitting at. I've got some nice white space up here. I haven't quite decided if I love what I'm doing, but right now I'm still in the process of copy fitting it. So really what we're trying to do is get this text to the end here. So if I'm adding a pull quote, there's only a certain amount of places where I could put a pull quote in this layout, just because we don't want to get a pull quote above these numbers or below these numbers, because we've already broken up this. We never put a pull quote right at the end of a story, because you really have to have text that ends the story. We wouldn't put a pull quote right up here because it would be sitting right next to this introduction, so that would get messy. So I also, if I'm being realistic about it, it's probably either going to start about halfway down this third column, or better yet, it's probably going to start over here. So pull quotes, by their very essence, are you're basically pulling a quote, traditional way of saying it, out of a story, featuring it. A lot of times, most of the times, it will actually occur in the story and then repeat itself as a pull quote. Sometimes a pull quote can be a completely different, it could be completely separate from the actual story. So in this case, I am just going to select something that's interesting. So despite these close calls against Doug Jones, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's not interesting. Vietnam War, Ali failed their first contest, trying spelling skills adequate to test. He refused to serve in the United States Army during the Vietnam War as a conscientious objector. So that's a really nice thought right there. And pull quote doesn't necessarily have to fall in the exact same spot. It should be relatively in the area that you're going to find the text. So all I'm going to do is sort of, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to draw, create a text box. There's my text box. And then because I'm sort of using an understated look here, my aim is to sort of pick up relatively the size of the introduction as my pull quote. So I'm going to sort of bring it up around this area. Then I'm going to bring up my text wraps. So I'm going to give myself lots of space. So in this case, all I'm going to do is just sort of eyedrop the original intro copy, and that actually makes my pull quote a little bit big. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. I'm still going to give myself lots of white space, but that intro copy was just a little bit big, and if I'm going to double it up, it really looks big. So you're probably asking, why is he making the pull quote exactly the same as the introduction? In design, in general, the more things that you can sort of relate to each other, whether that's alignment or colors or text, the more sort of more sort of balance it'll bring to your layout itself. So if you have a look here, I have that 16-point type there. It's 70% gray, or my pull quotes are 70% gray. So I'm also going to make my text here 70% gray. So I'm just going to click on black, hit 70%. Oh, what is it here? That's wrong. It's 80%, sorry. So I'm going to go back in and make that 80%. So all I'm doing is I'm trying to find subtleties that are going to work here. So right now I still have lots of tweaking to do on this layout. So as I get closer to completing it, you can see I've made a couple decisions. So I've decided that the intro copy is just too big to make it into a pull quote on a page like this. So I've given it its own style, and it fits in there a little bit better. I've moved my numbers off of the middle just so I don't completely break up this story so much. So now what I have to be careful about is this sort of space in here, how this breaks up here and then it starts there. So what I'm basically trying to figure out is where's the sort of comfort level so that there's text here and it still forms this box up here. So that's not bad right about there. So this is what you're going to match to. So there are lots of sort of things to consider here. One last thing, I'm going to make LE 80%, and I'm going to make Muhammad 40, 45. Then that relates a little bit more to my other text. So if you have a look now, basically I'm just going to adjust those. Now those are starting. So if you have a look at this layout now, right? Some of the things that I want you to really be conscious about is Muhammad Ali. There's a nice white space at the top. On my margins and columns, the relationship of this intro copy, so I've moved it down so it starts at the cap height of my third column. Making sure that you don't have any orphans or widows. So that will be the very last thing I adjust. And when I adjust it, I'm typically just moving a word or two around in my paragraph. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes it takes a few words to move around. That's okay. This is okay up here. So we have nice white space at the top. Our margins, we've got nice white space here. Look at this area in here where I've left a nice gap because this is a fairly intense, dense story. So basically I'm building kind of areas that are compact, but also areas where it allows the reader to sort of have a visual rest. So right underneath the title gives us a space. Another kind of space here. Then as we sort of scroll down and look at our actual story, we have a nice bit here that kind of starts the story before we move into another sort of break of the story. With this, I want you to be very careful that you're sort of visually looking to see that the space that you have above and below is relatively similar, and that's not really it's not really a measuring thing. So you can see that mine are actually slightly off here. So I can go in a little bit, and if I do that, then it's too much. But if I do that, I can then adjust both of these by just slightly moving them before I knock another line out. So now I'm getting pretty close, and that's still a nice gap in there. Same thing with my numbers here. They're set left, but they're basically centered in the column. And then I've used these nice thin rules as an accent. So I could repeat that somewhere else if I wanted to. So if I wanted to sort of use that, it's really kind of a concept. So if I were to do, let's see if I did a rule up here, I could put the name of the author or something like that. So it's one of those things. Okay, and finally, the second part of this, we are going to introduce an image. So I've jumped a little bit ahead, but I want you guys to sort of see what I've done here. I am adjusting my layout. I've taken out the infographics just because we're going to have an image, so it's going to take some of the attention away. and we're going to depend on it a little bit. So the other thing I'm going to do, or we are going to do with this one, is we are going to use we are going to mix our type. So we are going to use, we're going to stay with the serif body copy, but we are going to use sans serif for the headline, intro copy, and for the pull quote. So you can sort of see, if I highlight that for you, I have gone to Helvetica New Bold. It's 12/20. The pull quote is 10/17. The headline is extra black, 81. And then the first part of it is 33, and it's the Helvetica Light. So a lot of things to sort of look at there. I have jumped ahead, and I have an image sort of ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Place, and then I'm going to look for the full LE JPEG. And I know that it's not really big enough to be using like we're going to, but we're going to just anyways. So I am going to just click once to drop it in, and that will show you how small it actually is to work at 100%. Then I'll blow it up from there. So if you click on the edge like this, and you go Shift Option Command and drag it, you can blow it up that way. So I'm going to blow it way up. Now one of the things that I want to do is I kind of want to make this like a seamless layout. So I'm going to crop Muhammad so he is at the top of the page. The next thing I'm going to do is, because he has his body coming down like this, I would never leave, just kind of end the photo here, because it looks like part of it is missing. So I make a conscious decision to introduce something that will break up this image. If it was just a normal photograph, it would be fine because there would be background colors and things like that. But right now it's just going to be, if I hide it and do this, it's just kind of this strange photograph ending. So I'm going to send that to the back, and that is part of why I've brought in this large black rule. So I'm going to crop my image so that the black rule actually works as a device to sort of hold the image. And then again, you can sort of see the other thing that I'm doing is I'm blowing up this image quite large, and I'm not going to go into why that's wrong exactly right now, because that's a whole other conversation. But in this case, I want to have Muhammad quite large, and I want to have his kind of the title sitting right over top of his fist. So that's not bad. I don't want to crop too much of his head, because he has such, unlike myself, he has had very fantastic hair. So here we're just going to adjust things around a little bit. So you can sort of see one of the things I did was I've used on my runaround here, I've actually put quite a large runaround, as you can see, and that runaround cuts all of the text up at the top and basically sends it downwards. So that allows this column to sneak up, which is actually quite nice, because what it allows us to do is just sort of look like we're actually responding to the actual layout itself, and sort of how things line up. So it's kind of nice that we can have a third column that continues upwards, still doesn't interfere with the image, but looks like it was on purpose. So there we go. So right now we're pretty close. Just gonna move this guy up because we're missing some text here. We're missing some text. There we go. I just want to see where it ends. Yeah, so there, kind of ends there. So I've got a little bit of work to do. To make this fit, I've adjusted a little bit, so you can actually see that I've brought this pull quote down to the bottom. And the reason I've done that is because when you place a pull quote in the bottom, all you're really doing is knocking out the text that was there. You're not knocking back the text that would be actually underneath it. So by putting it down here, it actually reflows the text and actually fits now. So now basically our text is actually pretty good. So we've got an intro, we've got a pull quote, we've got our title that needs a little bit of work. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to give this Muhammad Ali layout just a little bit of just to make it a little bit funkier. We're going to do a couple things, and you are going to do this on yours. So there is a reason I have this type in blue. I am going to select this type, and I am going to give it a multiply. And we've done this a little bit in Illustrator. Now we're going to do it here. So I'm going to go select, I'm going to go multiply. Oops, that's fine. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to go shift, sorry. I'm going to select both boxes. So hold shift down, go shift option, move them over. And now I've got two of them, and I'm going to go up to my color palette and then give them a bit of a funky pink shift. So then I'm going to just overlap those and bring them to the front, overlap them a little bit, that type of thing. And then I'm going to make them a little bit transparent so that they don't overwhelm all of the type itself. So you can see I've actually done 3 layers of alley. What we're after here is not trying to do a drop shadow or an outline or anything like that. We're just trying to vibrate the text a little bit. So I actually have 3 levels, 3 different boxes that say alley on it. So the blue box is dark blue. It has a multiply on it. The pink also has a multiply on it. Then I've done the blue one again and shifted it to the right, and it has multiply and a transparency of about 20. So that's just going to make his name vibrate a little bit, try and get a little bit of movement into this layout. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the photo box, and I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to go shift option. I'm going to shift it to the right, just like we did with the text. Now, if I bring up my effects, I'm going to pull it down and put multiply on there. Now I'm going to actually, with my direct photo selector tool, which is the second one down, I am actually going to give it a slight pink shift, right? So you can sort of see that there. And this works when you have your images created as JPEGs. You can sort of color them directly in InDesign. So I'm going to select on the bottom one, and I'm going to give that one the dark blue shift. So now what we're trying to do is relate our image to our type and sort of give them both a bit of a kind of a vintage shift to it. So we'll do that. And then it's really up to you how much you want to shift it, how legible you want to make it. You could do just a little bit of a shift. You could send that to the back, and then give the other one a multiply as well. So the dark one is the more dominant one. And you can also play around with transparency. So if I send the dark blue one back and I select the pink one, and I look at the effects, I can also change that opacity to a point where, say you want to see more of his face, so you could kind of do that sort of thing. So we kind of leave it at that. The text isn't perfect, but that's okay. For our case, it's not bad. So you can play around with that. So those are a few things that we're going to try in the second half of this layout. The idea is that you are going to try and get this layout as close to what I've done as possible. So both of them. So you have a pure type one that we've looked at, and now we've looked at, so there's the original one, just pure type. So you're going to try and match that as close as you can. And then when you finish that one, you're going to try and match this one as close as you can. And this directly relates to our next major project. So that is it.